My aunts bet I'd stay with my unfaithful wife forever, so I left that same night. But what I revealed after crushed their perfect illusion. I'm a 34-year-old man, and until recently I thought my life was fine. Not perfect, but fine. I'd been married to my wife Natalie for 8 years, and while there were ups and downs, I never thought much of it. That changed a few weeks ago when I overheard a conversation I was never supposed to hear. It happened at my parents' house during a casual family dinner. My aunts, Margaret and Denise, were in the kitchen, whispering to each other while everyone else was in the living room. I'd gone to grab a drink when I heard my name, so I stopped just outside the doorway. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but something about their hushed voices made me hesitate. Margaret chuckled. "I bet you $50 he never leaves her." Denise scoffed. "Oh, please. He doesn't even realize how trapped he is. She has him completely under her thumb." I stood frozen. They were talking about me and Natalie. I don't know how long I stood there, but it was long enough to hear them agree that, no matter what happened, I would never leave because I was either too blind or too weak to see it. I didn't say anything that night. I sat through dinner like nothing was wrong, but my mind was racing. Why would they say that? Did my family really think my marriage was that bad? And more importantly, were they right? That night, I started thinking about my marriage in a way I never had before. It was like I was looking at my life from the outside, and suddenly, all the little things I had ignored didn't seem so little anymore. Natalie had always dismissed my hobbies. If I wanted to spend time painting, reading, or even watching a movie she wasn't interested in, she would roll her eyes and say I was wasting time. If I bought something for myself, whether it was a new book or something for my art, she would comment on how unnecessary it was. But if she wanted something, she would buy it without a second thought. She also had a habit of talking down to me in front of others. It wasn't outright insults, but small comments meant to undermine me. If I made a joke, she would sigh and say, "Ignore him. He thinks he's funny." If I offered an opinion on something, she would brush it off with a, "That's not really your thing, babe." I used to think it was harmless, but now I wasn't so sure. Then there was the money. We had a joint account which I thought was normal, but Natalie monitored it like a hawk. If I wanted to buy anything over a certain amount, she expected me to check with her first. She, however, never did the same. If I asked about a charge I didn't recognize, she would get defensive, acting as if I was accusing her of something. Looking back, I realized how isolated I had become. I had lost touch with several close friends over the years, and now that I thought about it, many of those friendships ended because Natalie didn't like them. She would always find a reason: he's immature, she's too negative, they're bad influences. At the time, I believed her. Now, I wasn't so sure. One memory stuck with me. A few months ago, a friend of mine invited me to go on a weekend trip with a group of guys we used to hang out with. Before I could even answer, Natalie laughed and said, "Oh, he's not allowed to do that." My friend gave me a weird look and said, "Seriously?" I laughed it off at the time, but I remember feeling embarrassed. I hadn't even thought to push back. I just let it happen. A few days after the family dinner, I casually mentioned overhearing something strange. I didn't say what I had heard exactly, just that my aunts had been talking about me and Natalie. She laughed it off immediately. "Oh, you know how your family is. They love to gossip." She changed the subject so quickly that I didn't even get a chance to push further. That same night, my younger brother Ryan pulled me aside. He asked if I was okay. When I told him I was fine, he hesitated before saying, "You know, I've always wondered if you were happy. It never seemed like you were." That hit me harder than I expected. Had it been that obvious to everyone but me? I started keeping track of things. Every time Natalie dismissed my opinions, controlled a decision, or made me feel small, I wrote it down. Within a week, I had a full list. It wasn't just one or two things, it was a pattern. I decided to reach out to an old friend, Caleb, someone I had drifted away from over the years. When we met up, I asked him why we had lost touch. He hesitated before saying, "Honestly, because Natalie never liked me, and I got the sense that if she didn't approve of someone, they weren't in your life for long." I didn't know what to say to that. I asked if he had ever thought Natalie was controlling. He gave me a look, like he was debating whether to be honest. "Yeah," he admitted, "but you seemed happy, so I didn't say anything." Hearing that from someone outside my family made everything feel real. For the first time, I looked at my marriage and saw it for what it was. Not a partnership, but something I had been conditioned to accept. I didn't know what my next step would be. But I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't going to ignore it anymore. A few days after reconnecting with my old friend, I decided to test the waters. I casually mentioned to Natalie that I was thinking of taking a solo weekend trip, just a short getaway to clear my head. Before I even finished, she cut me off. She frowned and asked why I suddenly wanted to do something like that. I shrugged and said I thought it would be nice. She laughed and told me it was weird for married people to go on trips alone. When I pushed back, she folded her arms and told me that this wasn't like me, that I was acting differently, and that someone must have put this idea in my head. For the first time in a long time, I stood my ground. I told her I wasn't asking for permission. That was when the argument started. She raised her voice, saying it was concerning that I wanted space all of a sudden. She accused me of being secretive, of changing for no reason, of letting other people influence me. Every time I tried to explain, she twisted it back on me. By the end of it, she was near tears, telling me she didn't understand why I was treating her this way. I let the conversation drop, but something about it felt off. Later that night, while she was in the shower, I checked our joint bank account. I hadn't looked closely in a while, and I immediately noticed several large purchases I didn't recognize: designer bags, expensive spa treatments, and high-end restaurant charges, none of which she had ever mentioned to me. I wasn't angry, I was just aware. This wasn't about the money, it was about control. She watched my spending like a hawk, yet she had no problem making major purchases without telling me. That was all I needed to see. The next day, I quietly opened a separate bank account. At my parents' house that weekend, my aunts were in rare form. They had clearly been drinking, and, right in front of everyone, Margaret grinned and nudged Denise. "Guess what? He's finally growing a spine." Denise smirked and said, "We might actually lose the bet." The whole room went quiet. My mother asked what they were talking about, and Margaret waved a hand dismissively. Just a little bet about whether he'd ever stand up to his wife. People chuckled awkwardly, but Natalie, she didn't look embarrassed or offended. She just rolled her eyes, leaned back in her chair, and said, "They're not wrong." No defense, no outrage, just a smirk, like it was a joke at my expense. I glanced at my brother Ryan across the room. He gave me a knowing look, like he was waiting to see if I would react. I didn't. I just sat there listening to the laughter, realizing that this had been the dynamic all along. I wasn't a partner in my own marriage. I was the punchline. After dinner, Ryan pulled me aside again. This time, he didn't dance around it. He told me that everyone had noticed the way Natalie controlled everything. He admitted that he never liked how she spoke to me, how she always had the final say. He just never said anything because he figured I was okay with it. That conversation stuck with me. On my way home, I decided I wasn't going to let things continue as they were. I started making small choices, little things, just to see how she would react. I made plans without checking in first. I changed the road I took to work. I stopped explaining my every move. Each time she noticed, and each time she pushed back. At first it was little comments. "Why are you being secretive? You're acting strange." Then, when I didn't engage, she started going through my phone. I caught her one night scrolling through my messages while I was in the shower. She looked up completely unfazed and said she was just making sure everything was okay. The cracks were showing. A few days later, I got a message from my cousin Erin. We hadn't talked in months, but she got straight to the point. She told me she had always felt like Natalie was manipulative but never wanted to interfere. She said she had seen how isolated I had become and that she was relieved I was starting to push back. Hearing it from Erin, someone who had no reason to lie, made everything hit even harder. It wasn't just my aunts gossiping. It wasn't just my brother noticing. People outside my immediate family had seen it too. That night, as I lay in bed, I finally let the truth sink in. I wasn't happy. I hadn't been for a long time. For the first time, I let myself think about what life would look like without Natalie in it. And for the first time, the idea didn't scare me. It felt like a possibility, maybe even a relief. The moment I decided to leave, I knew I had to be smart about it. I wasn't just walking away from a relationship, I was walking away from someone who had built her entire dynamic around control. If I made one wrong move, she would find a way to trap me. The first step was getting legal advice. I quietly booked an appointment with a divorce attorney under the pretense of handling some paperwork. The lawyer wasted no time. He asked me about our finances, debts, and assets. I told him we had a joint account and that Natalie monitored it closely. He nodded but then asked, "Do you have any credit cards in your name?" I said no. He told me to double check. Later that night, I logged into my credit report. It didn't take long to find it, an active credit card under my name that I had never opened. The balance wasn't outrageous, but it was clear she had been using it for months without telling me. All the expensive purchases I had noticed, they weren't just from our joint account. She had been racking up charges under my name. I confronted her the next day. I asked about the card, about the charges. She didn't deny it. Instead, she looked at me like I was the one who had done something wrong. She crossed her arms and told me I was being controlling, that couples share finances, and that she didn't need my permission to use money we both benefited from. When I pointed out that I never even knew the card existed, she rolled her eyes and told me I was acting paranoid. That was when I knew there was no coming back from this. A week later, we went out for dinner with friends. I barely spoke. I was still processing everything, still figuring out my next move. Natalie, on the other hand, was in full performance mode. She laughed, joked, acted like everything was perfect. Then, in front of everyone, she turned to me and smirked. "Where would you even go without me?" Everyone laughed, like it was funny, like it was normal for a wife to mock her husband in public. I didn't laugh. That night, I started moving my personal documents, birth certificate, passport, anything important, to a safe place. I started separating my things, making sure she wouldn't notice. I even started looking for temporary places to stay. I wasn't just leaving, I was making sure I had an escape plan. She must have sensed it. A few days later, the love bombing started. At first, it was subtle, an extra compliment here, a slightly softer tone when she spoke to me. Then, suddenly, she was planning date nights, cooking my favorite meals, bringing home small gifts. It felt forced, like an act she had rehearsed before, and instead of feeling touched, I felt wary. She started acting affectionate, kissing me in ways she hadn't in years. If I so much as sat on the couch, she would curl up next to me, talking about how she missed us being close. It would have been convincing if I didn't know what was behind it. I decided to test her. I started staying out later with friends, something she had always hated. I stopped giving her explanations for every little thing I did. I made small choices that were just for me. She noticed immediately. The fake sweetness cracked. She started making passive-aggressive comments, then outright snapping at me. One night, after I got home from dinner with Ryan, she accused me of turning against her, of letting outside people poison my mind. That was all I needed to see. A friend of mine, Caleb, didn't sugarcoat it when I told him what was happening. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "She's only nice when she thinks she's losing control." That same night, I found out from one of her friends, someone who didn't realize we were on the rocks, that Natalie had been telling people I was just going through a weird phase, that she just had to wait it out and I would get over it like I always did. She wasn't taking me seriously. I moved into the guest room that night. That was when she finally snapped. The next morning, she stood in the doorway, arms crossed, demanding to know what my problem was. She accused me of trying to ruin our marriage. She told me I was being brainwashed by my family, my friends, even the internet. I let her talk. I didn't argue. I didn't explain myself. Then I calmly told her I was done, that I was filing for divorce. For the first time, she looked genuinely shocked. She must have thought I was bluffing. Then her face hardened. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "No one will believe your side," she warned. "I'll make sure of that." I didn't respond. I just walked past her. That night, I finalized my preparations. I had a new place lined up. My personal savings were secured. I had spoken to my lawyer about next steps. For the first time in years, I was finally getting out. And for the first time, I felt free. After I told Natalie I was done, she went completely silent. No screaming, no crying, just cold, empty silence. For 2 days, she acted as if I didn't exist. If I walked into a room, she would turn and leave. If I spoke, she would pretend she didn't hear me. It was eerie how quickly she flipped the switch. On the third day, my phone rang. It was her mother. I let it go to voicemail. When I checked the message, her voice was thick with forced sympathy. She said Natalie was devastated, that she had barely eaten or slept. She begged me to reconsider, to think about everything we built together. The guilt was heavy in her tone, as if I had just casually thrown away years of my life over something trivial. That evening, Natalie finally broke the silence. She walked into the kitchen, arms crossed, eyes red. Her voice shook as she told me I was throwing everything away over nothing. She listed everything she had done for me over the years, every sacrifice, every compromise. She made it sound like I had been given the perfect wife and had decided to leave just for the fun of it. When I didn't respond the way she wanted, the tears stopped and the anger surfaced. She accused me of making up problems. She said I had been distant for months and that if there were issues in our marriage, it was because I had given up. She wanted to know if my family was feeding me ideas or if I had someone else lined up. I told her I was done explaining myself. That was when she lost it. Her voice rose, her hands balled into fists. She called me selfish, ungrateful, a coward who didn't know how good he had it. Then came the threats. She said she would take everything in the divorce, that I would regret this, that she would make sure I walked away with nothing. I told her I had already spoken to a lawyer. That shut her up fast. Later that night, my phone buzzed non-stop. Some of our mutual friends had heard about the separation, and the reactions were mixed. Some told me they supported me and that they had seen the way she treated me for years. Others were not so kind. One message stood out. A mutual friend told me I was being heartless, that I had blindsided Natalie, that I was acting like I was too good for her. It didn't take long for the real manipulation to begin. Within a few days, I started hearing from people that Natalie had been telling everyone I was going through a midlife crisis. She was painting herself as the perfect wife who had been abandoned out of nowhere. My brother Ryan saw right through it. He called me and said, "I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. She's going to do everything she can to make you look like the bad guy, but don't let her." Then came the social media post. I woke up to texts from people linking me to a dramatic, vague post Natalie had made. She wrote about trust being shattered and being betrayed by the one person she thought would never leave. It was designed for sympathy, and it worked. The comments were full of people reassuring her, calling me a horrible person without even knowing the full story. I didn't respond. I refused to play her game. That same day, I got a message from someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Caleb, an old friend I had drifted apart from when Natalie started isolating me. He told me he had always seen red flags in our marriage, but never said anything because he knew I wouldn't have listened back then. He told me if I needed anything, even just someone to talk to, he was there. It was strange realizing how much of my life had been controlled by Natalie without me even noticing. The friends I had lost, the choices I hadn't made for myself. It was like waking up from a fog I had been in for years. A few days later, I packed my things. I had arranged a temporary place to stay, and I wasn't about to drag this out any longer. Natalie was in the living room when I carried out the first box. She barely looked at me. When I walked out the front door, she finally spoke. "Just remember," she said, her voice low, "no one will ever see you the way I did." I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I got in my car, drove away, and for the first time in years, I was free. The first legal hit came fast. Less than a week after I moved out, my lawyer called to let me know that Natalie had filed paperwork demanding an unreasonable amount of alimony. We both worked full-time, and she actually made slightly more than I did. Yet she was acting as if she had been financially dependent on me for years. The lawyer wasn't surprised. He told me it was a common tactic: ask for more than what's reasonable, drag things out, and hope the other person gives in just to get it over with. But I was ready for this. I told him to fight it. Then came the next discovery. My lawyer had me go over all of our joint financial records, and that was when I saw it. Natalie had been quietly withdrawing extra money in small amounts, keeping it just under the threshold where I would normally notice. It was subtle, but over time it had added up significantly. She had been stashing it away, likely preparing for the moment she knew was coming. She never mentioned any of it when we had talked about finances, but it was all there, clear as day. The lawyer immediately flagged it as something we could use in court. He pointed out how she had kept her withdrawals just small enough to avoid suspicion, strategically spreading them out over months so I wouldn't notice a sudden large transaction. 2 days later, Natalie changed tactics. Instead of threats and demands, she suddenly became reflective, remorseful. She called me, voice soft, saying she wanted to work on herself, that she understood now where she went wrong, that if I just gave her another chance, she would prove she could change. I didn't engage. I simply told her that this wasn't about minor mistakes or misunderstandings. This was years of control, manipulation, and emotional games. There was no fixing something that had been built on control from the start. She didn't take that well. Within days, she started reaching out to my family. My mother mentioned in passing that Natalie had called, sounding heartbroken, saying she just didn't understand what happened and that she was blindsided by my decision to leave. She painted herself as the devastated wife left behind by a husband who had suddenly changed overnight. My mother didn't press me on it, but I could tell the conversation had planted doubt in her mind. Then my phone buzzed with a long message from an unknown number. It was her mother. I had blocked her before, but she must have used a different number to contact me. The message was a full guilt trip, blaming me for destroying their family, for not appreciating everything Natalie had done for me. She wrote about how hard her daughter was taking this, and how I was being cruel by refusing to talk to her. I didn't reply. I blocked her number. That was the last contact I would ever have with Natalie's mother. Not long after, Natalie tried again. She sent a text, different from the previous ones. Instead of guilt or anger, it was a carefully crafted message pretending to finally understand everything. She said she'd been doing a lot of self-reflection and that she wanted to apologize for how she had treated me. I ignored it. Then came the social media meltdown. A friend sent me a screenshot of a long, dramatic post she had made. It was vague enough to avoid directly naming me, but detailed enough that anyone who knew us would know exactly who she was talking about. She wrote about being abandoned without warning by the person she had loved most. She talked about betrayal, about how some people throw away years like they mean nothing. The comments were full of sympathy. Some people from our old social circles messaged me, clearly taking her side. A few mutual friends stopped reaching out altogether. Her campaign was working, at least on some people. Then my parents called. They had initially been supportive, but over time my mother started asking more hesitant questions, clearly struggling between trusting me and feeling sympathy for Natalie's claims. My mother hesitated before asking, "Are you sure you tried everything?" My father, usually quiet about personal matters, asked if I had considered therapy before deciding on divorce. I shut it down quickly. I told them I had spent years compromising, bending, and justifying. There was nothing left to try. Not everyone believed her lies, though. In the middle of everything, I started reconnecting with people I had lost touch with. Old friends I had stopped talking to because Natalie had found reasons to dislike them. One friend admitted he had always thought I had faded away because I was just too busy. But now he realized it was because of how much Natalie had controlled my social life. The legal battle dragged on. Every negotiation, every attempt to settle, was met with resistance. She refused to compromise, making the process as exhausting and expensive as possible. The lawyer warned me that this was another tactic. She wanted to wear me down so that I would give up more than I needed to just to be done with it. But despite everything, I felt lighter. For the first time in years, I was making my own choices. The chaos she was creating didn't pull me back in. It only pushed me further away. I wasn't trapped anymore. And no matter how much she fought, she couldn't change that. Natalie's legal strategy shifted overnight. After weeks of dragging out the divorce with aggressive demands, she suddenly flipped the script. Instead of fighting for everything, she started playing the victim. In court, she painted herself as blindsided, abandoned, struggling to cope with the sudden loss of her husband. She spoke about how difficult it was to be left without warning, how she had been willing to work on things but was given no chance. It was calculated. She was trying to make herself look helpless, hoping the judge would take pity on her. My lawyer saw right through it. He warned me that this was a common move. When the aggressive approach failed, some people resorted to sympathy tactics to secure a favorable ruling. Then came the real betrayal. A mutual acquaintance reached out, hesitating before dropping the news. Natalie had been secretly meeting up with one of my close friends, someone I had trusted for years. At first I thought it had to be a misunderstanding, but the details lined up, the times, the locations. It wasn't just a one-time thing. I called the friend directly. There was silence on the other end before he started fumbling through excuses. He said it just happened, that they had been talking a lot after our separation, that she had been in a rough place. He swore it wasn't a betrayal, but the guilt in his voice said otherwise. I hung up and blocked him. That was the last conversation we would ever have. It didn't stay a secret for long. Word spread quickly, and suddenly, Natalie's carefully built victim narrative collapsed. People who had initially believed her story, who thought I had left her out of nowhere, started questioning everything. A few mutual friends reached out awkwardly, admitting they had assumed the worst about me. Even my parents, who had wavered before, now saw the full picture. My mother called, her voice tight, saying she couldn't believe how manipulative Natalie had been. My father simply told me he was proud that I had stayed strong through it all. Then, out of nowhere, another call from her mother. The voicemail was long, rambling, full of desperation. She said Natalie was falling apart, that she was losing everything and had made a mistake. She begged me to at least talk to her, to help her through this. I didn't respond. I blocked her number. The divorce was now moving faster. With proof of Natalie's financial manipulation, infidelity, and smear campaign, my lawyer had solid leverage. The judge wasn't easily swayed by emotional theatrics, and her legal team likely advised her that pushing too hard could backfire. After months of stubborn resistance, she suddenly became much more willing to negotiate. It was clear that her lawyer saw the writing on the wall. Dragging this out any longer would only expose more of her lies. My aunts, who had always been opinionated but mostly uninvolved, suddenly started making their opinions known to everyone. It was clear they had always suspected how this would end, but they had waited until after the fact to say anything. I ran into Margaret at a family event, and she shook her head, smirking. We always knew it would end badly, but even we didn't expect this much of a mess. As more people found out the truth, I started getting messages from friends I had lost over the years. Some apologized for believing her side of the story. Others admitted they had always felt something was off but never wanted to get involved. It was strange, seeing my old social circle shift again. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was reconnecting with the people I had lost. Then, just when I thought everything was finally over, she showed up at my temporary apartment. It was late. I had just gotten home when I heard the knock. When I checked the peephole, she was standing there, tears streaming down her face. She looked nothing like the confident, manipulative woman I had been fighting in court for months. She looked desperate, exhausted. She pleaded, saying she was sorry, that she had made mistakes, that we could fix things. I didn't open the door. I stood there, listening to her cry, waiting for her words to change, waiting for the moment when the act would slip and the real Natalie would come out. It didn't take long. The tears turned into anger. She started blaming me, accusing me of ruining her life, of turning everyone against her. She warned me that I would regret this, that I would never find someone who loved me like she did. I turned and walked away from the door. Eventually, she left. A few days later, the divorce was finalized. No more court dates, no more manipulations, no more games. For the first time in years, I was free, and for the first time in years, my life was finally my own. Not long after the divorce was finalized, Natalie's usual antics slowed down. At first, I expected more dramatic posts or messages, but instead, I noticed a shift. Her attention seemed to turn elsewhere, likely onto someone new. No more social media rants, no more dramatic posts about betrayal, no more desperate attempts to contact me. For someone who had spent months dragging the process out and making herself the center of attention, the sudden shift was almost eerie. At first, I thought she was just finally accepting reality. But then I started noticing the change in her online presence. Her posts were no longer about heartbreak and victimhood. Instead, she was posting about growth, healing, and self-love. Every caption was carefully crafted about finding inner peace, moving forward, and letting go of negativity. The people who had taken her side during the divorce were eating it up, leaving comments about how strong she was, how inspiring her journey was. It was all an act. A mutual acquaintance reached out, filling in the missing piece. Natalie had started dating someone new, one of her co-workers, and not just casually dating, she was already calling him the best thing that ever happened to her. The same exact words she had once used about me. That was why she had gone silent. She didn't need to play the heartbroken victim anymore because she had found her next target. It was almost comical how fast the pattern repeated itself. Within weeks, she was posting about him constantly. Pictures of expensive dates, grand gestures, captions about how she had finally found someone who truly understood her. The people who had supported her during the divorce were now celebrating this new chapter in her life, acting like she had been reborn into a better, happier person. Meanwhile, her family, especially her mother, who had once harassed me nonstop, had completely vanished from my life. Not a single message, no more guilt trips, nothing. It was as if they had collectively decided to pretend I had never existed. Then, out of nowhere, she reached out. It was a short message, casual, as if we were old friends catching up. There was no mention of the past, no apologies, nothing about the divorce, just a simple, "Hey, hope you're doing well." I didn't respond. I deleted it without a second thought. That was the moment I realized just how much power I had regained. A few months ago, I would have felt obligated to reply. I would have gone back and forth, trying to make sense of what she wanted. But now she was just another person from my past. While she was busy playing out her usual cycle with someone new, I was rebuilding the life I had lost. I reconnected with old friends, the people she had slowly pushed out of my life. One by one, they welcomed me back without hesitation. Some admitted they had always felt like I had changed when I was with her but never wanted to overstep. Others apologized for not reaching out sooner. I started traveling. Something as simple as booking a trip on a whim felt like freedom. There were no more passive-aggressive comments about wasting money or being irresponsible. No more justifications. No more explaining myself to someone who saw my choices as problems. Then came the final punchline. Barely a few months after our divorce was finalized, Natalie announced her engagement. It was a whirlwind, even by her standards, making it clear she had never truly taken time to reflect. She posted a picture of her new fiancé, smiling, glowing, showing off a ring that looked eerily similar to the one I had once given her. The caption was predictable, "When you know, you know." Mutual friends started whispering. Even some of the people who had been firmly in her corner during the divorce were questioning how genuine her healing journey had really been. The whole act of self-reflection and personal growth had apparently lasted just long enough to get her engaged again. For the first time in a long time, I didn't care. There was no anger, no frustration, no bitterness, just relief. She was someone else's problem now, and I was finally free. Not long after Natalie's engagement announcement, cracks started forming. I wasn't keeping tabs on her, but mutual friends had a way of passing along updates, whether I wanted to hear them or not. The new fiancé was already having second thoughts. At first, People dismissed it as typical pre-wedding jitters, but the same complaints kept coming up. He had started noticing the same things I once ignored: how she needed to be in control, how every decision had to go through her, how she could switch from sweet to cold in seconds if she didn't get her way. People started whispering that history was repeating itself. I stayed out of it. When mutual friends hinted at the drama, waiting to see if I had anything to say, I shrugged it off. It wasn't my problem. Natalie, however, was not one to accept silence. Her social media posts became increasingly passive-aggressive. She made vague statements about toxic men and how some people pretend to be something they're not. But the responses were different this time. The same people who once blindly supported her were either ignoring it or outright rolling their eyes. She had played the victim card one too many times. Then, through a mutual acquaintance, I heard that her fiancé had been asking questions about Natalie's past. He hadn't reached out to me directly, but the fact that he was looking for answers spoke volumes. It was short, almost hesitant. He said he knew it was awkward, but he wanted to ask me something. He wasn't looking for dirt or gossip, he just wanted to know if there was anything I thought he should be aware of. I stared at the message for a while before responding. I didn't go into details. I didn't rant or warn him. I just gave him one piece of advice: trust your instincts. He saw the message and never replied. Less than 3 months after her grand engagement announcement, the relationship imploded. The news spread fast: no wedding, no happy ending. Natalie went silent for a while, then predictably launched back into her routine. She made dramatic posts about being betrayed and used, acting as if she hadn't rushed into another relationship just to prove a point. But this time, no one was buying it. Her financial situation worsened quickly. Without someone else to financially control, she struggled to maintain the lifestyle she had always demanded. The excessive spending habits, the reckless purchases, there was no one left to manage it for her. She had spent years depending on others to carry her burdens, and now there was no one left to shoulder them. Her reputation took a hit too. People who had once defended her started distancing themselves. It wasn't just about me anymore. There was a clear pattern in her failed relationships, her manipulations, her endless attempts to control the narrative. Even some of the people who had doubted me during the divorce reached out, admitting they had been wrong. I ran into my parents at a family gathering, and my mother finally acknowledged what she had refused to see before. She admitted she had once believed I was overreacting, that I had left too suddenly. But now, with everything that had unfolded, she saw it for what it was. My father, who had always been more reserved, simply patted my shoulder and told me, "You did the right thing." Then, just when I thought I had heard the last of her, she reached out one final time. The message was different from the others. There was no guilt-tripping, no manipulation, no fake remorse. Just a simple statement: "I just want closure." I didn't answer. I blocked her for good. It took me a long time to realize it, but Natalie only reached out when she was struggling, when she had no one left to control. I wasn't going to be a part of that cycle anymore. For the first time, she was truly out of my life. And this time, it was permanent. Life after Natalie felt like stepping into a world I had forgotten existed. For the first time in years, I woke up without stress looming over me. There was no one monitoring my choices, no one questioning my decisions, no one making me second-guess myself. I had my life back. Work became something I actually enjoyed again. Without Natalie's constant interference, I had more time and energy to focus on my career. It paid off quickly. I landed a major promotion that had seemed impossible before. My boss even joked that I was a different person lately. I didn't bother explaining why. A few months later, I started dating again. It was different this time. No walking on eggshells, no controlling comments disguised as jokes, no silent disapproval when I spent time with friends. The woman I was seeing actually encouraged my independence. She had her own life, her own interests, and she wanted me to have mine. It was new, but it felt right. Meanwhile, Natalie was still playing her same game. I never checked her social media myself, but mutual friends occasionally sent me screenshots or mentioned things in passing. The latest was a long, dramatic rant about how some people never appreciate what they had. It was vague enough to avoid directly mentioning me, but obvious enough that everyone knew who she was talking about. For the first time, I didn't even care. I deleted the message and moved on with my day. At a family gathering, my aunts were in rare form. Margaret laughed, nudging Denise. "We actually won the bet twice," she said. First, that he'd leave. Second, that she'd crash and burn after. Ryan overheard and smirked. Should have put money on it. Even my parents, who had once questioned if I had tried hard enough, admitted they were wrong. My mother pulled me aside and apologized. She told me she should have trusted my judgment from the start. My father simply said, "You did what you had to do. One day I ran into an old friend, one of the people Natalie had forced me to cut off. There was no awkwardness, no resentment. We picked up right where we left off like no time had passed. He didn't even ask about her. We just laughed, caught up, and made plans to hang out. Natalie's reputation, on the other hand, had taken a permanent hit. People had finally started to see the pattern in her behavior, the rushed relationships, the love bombing, the way she always played the victim. More and more people distanced themselves from her, not because of me, but because they saw through her games. Then, right on schedule, she moved on to another man, another whirlwind romance, another soulmate, another carefully curated public performance of happiness. But this time, it meant nothing to me. Her life was no longer my concern. Instead, I was focused on my own. I had a job I loved, a relationship built on mutual respect, friends I had regained, and the ability to make my own choices without someone else's approval. Leaving wasn't just about escaping a bad marriage. It was about reclaiming my life, and I had finally done it.